Hi, welcome back to So You Want to Write a Novel. Although I call this episode Getting the Setting, it really should be Getting the Settings, because all the characters in these or any stories live and move in a context the same way that characters in a play occupy the stage and move around on it and in it, whether it has real scenery or you're asked simply to imagine it. Setting is actually a subset of a larger environmental context we call the locale. If the setting is the context of the action, the locale is the context of the context. The locale provides many of the basic parameters of the story. In what country or region does the story take place? What's the language they're speaking? In what historical era? How are they dressed? What manners and customs do they observe? What's their socioeconomic level or condition? Is the locale real or imagined? What's the climate like? What season of the year? What benefits does the locale provide them? What challenges does it present? What's the altitude? What's the terrain like? Is it city, suburban, or country? How isolated is it? Here are some examples to help you envision the importance of locale. Let's start with downtown Manhattan, New York City. That's a very specific and relatable locale, even regardless of the historical context. Next, how about Death Valley in mid-July? Can you feel it? Now let's try the middle of the South Pacific. That one's a bit too generalized, isn't it? We need to know more, like what are we near? Where did we come from and where are we going and why? Let's try one more. The summit of Mount Everest. That's pretty specific, isn't it? As a matter of fact, that locale is specific enough to be a setting all by itself. I've spoken a little bit about settings when I discussed doing research. Most of your research, however, will be focused on getting the locale right. What does it look like? What makes up the surrounding scenery? What do the people look like? What's the light like during the day? What's it feel like at night? What's it smell like? What sounds do you hear? If there's any weakness in my writing, I tend to focus a little too much on the action and not give sufficient attention to those sorts of details. When I remember to bring them in, my readers feel grounded in the story, and some have even commented on how easy it is to envision my settings. Like most things in crafting a story, balance is the key. Have you ever read a novel where the author goes overboard on detail? I have. I feel like saying, yeah, we get it. Get on with the story. Too little, and the reader's left in the dark. Too much, and they're drowning in it. The setting, as I've said, is where the action happens. I read in Elizabeth George's book something I try to keep in mind. The setting is another character. It has a role to play. What's a horror story without a spooky old mansion? Or better yet, a castle? The setting can and maybe should reflect or even enhance the character's attitudes. We Are Not Saints, the priest, starts off in Jared's room in the seminary in Rome. It's simple and institutional. As we explore the building with Jared, we find it a little cold and impersonal. It's also nearly empty. School's out. The year's ended. One phase of life is done. Jared meets a fellow student who's packing to leave. The emptiness of the place suggests Jared's inner state. The next setting is the seminary chapel. Same locale, entirely different setting. Paul sits in the dark in the empty room. It echoes the emptiness inside as he wrestles one last time with the dichotomy between his love for Jared and his commitment to ordination. He's looking for answers, but the space is empty and silent, except for a set of footsteps down below him on the chapel floor that only echo in the space, emphasizing the silence. Paul's doubts echo in the space too. His doubts not only about the priesthood, but about Jared. In the silence, Paul quiets both sets of doubts, a silencing he'll later regret. That same evening, after the ordination, Paul and his family, along with Hannah and Kurt, Jared's stepmother and father, sit down to dinner with Cardinal Romero in a quaint, old Italian restaurant. Like the seminary, the Ristorante Antico Arco exists in real life. I use photos of the restaurant, interiors and exteriors, as a basis for my descriptions. When I can actually see the setting, it's so much easier to make it real. Do I play free and easy with the details? Yes, of course. The images in my readers' minds won't match the reality anyway, regardless of how accurate I attempt to be. Speaking of accuracy, when I base a setting on a real place or business, should I use the real name and address? It all depends on how I'm using the setting. In the case of the Antico Arco, since it was a good and pleasant meal attended by a cardinal of the church, at worst it would be good publicity for the place. Throughout my books, I tended to use real businesses and very often used their real names. Jared flies a real plane out of a real fixed-based operator on a real airport. In my upcoming book, Sycamore Boy, Tony, my main character, lives and works in Chicago, and someone familiar with that neighborhood will have a real sense of place when they read about landmarks they can identify and may possibly have visited. There are exceptions. I can easily imagine some Catholic clergy and laity may not appreciate the way church men and women in my books accept gay relationships, even among the clergy. Not that it doesn't happen. In order to stave off these sorts of controversies, I've changed the names of all churches and Catholic schools, even though they're all based on real places. In some cases, it would be easy to investigate the church or school I was referring to, but by using different names, I retain plausible deniability. There is one more exception that's not based on any real setting, and it figures prominently in several of my books. That's the Chancery Office of the Diocese of San Luis Obispo. In fact, there is no such building because there is no such diocese. Again, this was very deliberate so that the haters have nothing real to hate. Of course, that goes equally well for the diocesan cathedral. In fact, if anyone were to try to locate it, they'd find it sat on the spot occupied for centuries by the famous Mission San Luis Obispo de Tolosa. I found a neat trick to realize the settings for apartments and condos where my characters may live. In their city or town, I looked for apartments for rent. I chose the area I was interested in, perhaps near some feature mentioned in the story. Then looked for apartments with interior photographs, or even better, with floor plans. I used the buildings' names and addresses because It could only enhance the reality, but didn't use apartment numbers for obvious reasons. Remember to take Puba's advice. Getting realistic settings lends artistic verisimilitude to an otherwise bald and unconvincing narrative. I hope you've been able to get a clearer picture of the process I use to develop locales and settings. Now I want to make an announcement. I've taken a few weeks recently to put together an online tool that I hope will help those of you who are or want to become authors. I'm calling it Novel Bank, and I've designed it to be your silent assistant, keeping track of your chapters, scenes, settings, and characters, giving you space to develop them and a way to attach digital copies of your research, photos, documents, notes, and even videos directly to where you need them the most and can find them. It does much more than that, and I invite you to watch for my next episode where I'll be able to give you a better and more thorough introduction to it. You won't want to miss that one. So I look forward to having you back with me then.